We all know that frustrating moment when you're trying to learn something and suddenly it's like hitting a brick wall. The explanation just isn't sticking. Your mind starts to wander. The whole learning process feels like it's got completely sideways.
Yeah,
That feeling of a lesson going kaput, as our source article aptly puts it, is something, well, we can all relate to, right?
absolutely. And that's precisely what we're diving into today. We're drawing from the insights of experienced educators in an article called What to Do When Your Lesson Goes Kaput, and we're extracting key strategies that you can use
Right.
for navigating those inevitable moments when your learning hits a snag. Think of this as your toolkit for turning those frustrating roadblocks into, well, opportunities for real understanding.
Okay, so whether you're tackling a new skill, trying to master some complex topic, or even just, trying to follow along in a dense conversation, this deep dive should help grip you.
Hmm.
We'll be looking at how to recognize when your learning is going off track, that sinking ship feeling we mentioned.
Yeah, that feeling.
We'll explore simple, effective ways to pivot in the moment, why having backup plans doesn't need to be complicated, and the power of reframing mistakes as essential steps forward.
And plus, we'll highlight why reflecting on these learning hiccups and practicing a little self-kindness are so important.
Great. So where do we start?
Let's start with that crucial first step. Recognizing when you're learning, or a lesson, if you will, just isn't working for you. There's the story about Josh Stock, a sixth grade literature teacher.
Oh, okay.
It offers a really relatable picture. He was trying to teach his students about theme, and he quickly realized he was losing them. Kids were doodling, their eyes were glazed over. Does that sound familiar?
Oh, absolutely. I can totally picture that feeling of trying to absorb something and your brain just like starts entertaining itself with anything else.
Exactly.
Stock's experience is insightful because he didn't just power through. After about 20 minutes, he recognized it wasn't connecting and shifted gears to choice reading.
Right, he pivoted.
So think about those times you felt lost or disengaged when trying to learn something new. That's the sinking ship feeling you need to recognize in your own learning process.
That vivid image of a lesson as a sinking ship that actually comes from a first grade teacher, Anne Gilliard. She described a classroom of 30 wiggling, blank-faced, and even whining students.
Wow, 30.
Yeah, it really underscores the need for a quick assessment. Is this salvageable, or do I need to change course?
So when you find yourself in that kind of disengagement, the question becomes, do you keep pushing, hoping for a breakthrough, or do you pivot?
And Gilliard offers some very direct wisdom here. She says, sometimes a flop is a flop, and there's no recovering from it.
Oof, that's tough, but crucial insight for you, the learner, too. Sometimes that explanation you're reading just isn't clicking, no matter how many times you reread it.
And another educator, Ashton G., echoed this. They admitted it took time to recognize when a lesson was truly off the rails, mentioning a tendency to overcommit, hoping students would grasp something even if it wasn't the intended point.
Which is a trap we can all fall into when we're learning something ourselves, right?
Totally.
We've invested time and energy, and it's tempting to just keep hammering away.
Yeah.
But sometimes the most productive thing you can do is pivot.
Exactly. And as the article highlights, pivoting in your own learning doesn't need to be this massive overhaul. It could be switching to a different resource, trying a different approach, maybe even just taking a short break to reset.
Yeah, a breather.
They also mention these academic sponge activities. Think of them as short, engaging mental workouts, like a quick free write on the topic or trying to explain it in simple terms to yourself.
Okay.
Stuff that can help you regain focus and keep your learning on track while you reassess your strategy.
Exactly. It's like hitting the reset button on your mental browser without closing all the tabs. So you've recognized that your learning is going sideways. What can you do in that immediate moment?
Well, the first and perhaps most important piece of advice from these educators, and one that applies directly to you, is stay calm.
Easier said than done sometimes.
True. But educators Miranda D. and Amelia F. Rain both emphasize the importance of flexibility. Learning environments and, frankly, any attempt to learn something new, they're dynamic. Things won't always go according to your initial plan.
It's a good reminder that it's okay if things get confusing.
Yeah.
It's not like a reflection of your intelligence or ability.
Not at all.
And having some backup options ready can really take the pressure off in those moments. Miranda D. talks about having a toolkit of backup options to keep students engaged, even when those on-the-spot changes are needed.
Right.
So just like having those go-to recipes in your kitchen, what are some simple, readily available mental ingredients you can have for when your learning hits a snag? Maybe a different way to explain a concept to yourself, or a quick online search for a different perspective.
And these backup plans, they don't need to be these elaborate, intricate strategies. Jason DeHart makes a great point that you don't need a MacGyver kit of escape supplies. Simple strategies can be incredibly effective for you too.
Like what? Give us some examples of simple backup plans for our listener.
Okay, so DeHart suggests things like maybe having a list of related online resources you can quickly consult, keeping some blank graphic organizers handy for visually structuring information.
Oh, they like visual aids.
Yeah, or having some general question stems ready to prompt deeper thinking, or even just mentally drawing up a quick T-chart to compare and contrast different aspects of what you're learning. These are low prep but versatile tools for your own learning.
I like that idea of having those readily available mental tools. It's kind of like having a few go-to phrases or analogies in your mind when you're trying to explain something complex. Dehart also mentioned brief jots in response to a text, having students connect themes to their own lives as a quick pivot activity.
Right.
So for you, the listener, that can mean pausing and asking yourself, okay, how does this relate to what I already know? What's a personal example of this concept?
That's a really meaningful way to redirect your focus. It keeps the learning connected to the original goal, but shifts the activity to something more immediately engaging and personal.
Yeah.
DeHart calls it finding freedom on the side of a panic-stricken moment. It's about having those simple, reliable strategies that you can pull out when your understanding feels shaky.
Okay, so we've talked about recognizing when things go wrong and having backup plans. But what about when we as learners, or even when we're trying to explain something to someone else and we, stumble, make a mistake?
That's a fantastic point, and it's something we often overlook in our own learning. The article highlights how teacher mistakes can actually be valuable learning opportunities for students. And for you, acknowledging your own mistakes in learning can be incredibly powerful.
How so?
Well, Tammy R. points out that lesson failures can show students, and by extension yourself, that mistakes are inevitable for everyone and a way to grow and learn.
It takes the pressure off, doesn't it? It kind of humanizes the learning process.
It really does. And Miss M had a really interesting suggestion about involving students when a lesson falters, asking them to research the material and even create their own test questions.
Huh. How can we apply that to our own learning?
Well, what's fascinating here is how that shifts you from being just a passive recipient of information to an active investigator. If you find yourself stuck on a concept, instead of just rereading the same thing over and over.
Which often doesn't help.
Right. Try researching related ideas or even formulating your own questions about it. Mrs. M also notes that witnessing a teaching fail shows that learning is a journey that continues throughout life and, importantly, fosters trust and connection. When we're willing to be honest about our own learning struggles, it can actually deepen our understanding and make the process feel less isolating.
Absolutely. And I loved Vincent N's idea of having a failure chart on the whiteboard to normalize mistakes in the classroom.
Yeah, that's bold.
For you, the listener, that might look like keeping a learning journal where you not only track your progress, but also explicitly acknowledge the areas where you struggled or made errors. Don't just hide them.
That's a powerful way to create a culture of growth within yourself, where mistakes aren't seen as these huge setbacks, but rather as like data points that can guide your learning forward.
Right, data points. Okay, so after a learning attempt goes sideways, you've maybe made a mistake, you've pivoted. What's the next step for us?
Reflection. It's absolutely crucial. As Anne Gilliard says, improvement only happens when you regularly reflect.
Makes sense.
Even dedicating just 5 minutes after a challenging learning session to think about what worked and what didn't can make a significant difference over time. She even mentions that with practice, you might find yourself reflecting in the moment while you're still trying to grasp a concept.
Like real-time adjustment. Tammy R. mentioned using the backward design model, which is interesting.
Yeah, explain that a bit.
Okay, so for you, think of it like this. First, identify what you want to be able to do or understand at the end of your learning. That's your goal. Then look back at the steps you took to get there. If things went sideways, you can often see more clearly where the disconnect happened between your goal and your approach.
Right. It's about being intentional in your reflection. Brianna suggests asking yourself specific questions like, what could have been done differently, and how could I approach this better next time? This kind of focused questioning helps you identify areas for improvement in your learning strategies.
And Morena D. also brought up the importance of making sure learning materials are clear, engaging, and manageable. That seems like a fundamental piece that's worth revisiting during your own reflection. Are the resources you're using actually helping you, or are they part of the problem?
Definitely. If the core materials are confusing or overwhelming, that can really set the stage for things to go awry.
Good point.
Marina D also suggests a really practical technique for you. Try explaining the concept you're learning to someone else, or even just to yourself out loud, step by step.
Like the Feynman technique.
Sort of, yeah. This can reveal gaps in your understanding that you might not have even been aware of. And she reminds us to consider your own learning needs and attention span. Think about how things like taking short breaks, trying a hands-on approach, or discussing the topic with someone could boost your engagement.
All of this reflection is so valuable for improving future learning experiences.
Hmm.
But what about how we feel in the moment after we've struggled with something? It can be pretty discouraging for anyone.
Yeah, that's where self-compassion comes in. The article acknowledges that learning environments are often unpredictable, making those kaput moments almost inevitable.
True.
Jason DeHart's reflection on his former student's tweet is really insightful here. He recognized that shared tendency towards
Oh,
perfectionism
yeah.
and emphasized the importance of giving ourselves permission to play, to try, to fail, to try again in our own learning journeys.
That idea of permission to play, that feels really freeing when you're tackling something new and difficult. It takes away some of the pressure to get it right immediately.
It really does. And the article mentions veteran teachers adopting a work-in-progress mindset. That's a great reminder for all of us, whatever we're learning.
A work in progress.
Exactly. John Spencer highlights the importance of starting from a place where you accept that imperfection is just part of the process, both in teaching and in learning. It's going to feel challenging sometimes, and there will be moments of confusion. That's okay.
And I really appreciated Lori Frayson's analogy of teachers as learners. As she points out, if you're new to something, you're not going to know everything. You're essentially a beginner in that area, just like a student learning it for the first time.
Right. And so instead of being overly critical of yourself when things don't click right away, Friesen encourages you to treat yourself with the same grace and patience you would extend to someone else who is learning.
Like you would for a student or your own kid.
Exactly. Choose one aspect to focus on at a time and allow yourself to stumble as you improve. Give yourself permission to fail while you're getting better.
That's such a powerful reminder to give ourselves the same understanding and support we hopefully offer to others who are on their own learning journey.
So just to recap our deep dive into handling those kaput learning moments that you inevitably encounter, we've explored the importance of recognizing when to pivot your approach,
Knowing when to change course.
having simple and readily accessible backup strategies, reframing your mistakes as valuable steps in understanding,
Not failures, but data.
the necessity of regular reflection to pinpoint areas for growth, and finally, the crucial role of self-compassion in navigating those frustrating challenges.
And while these strategies come from the world of teaching, it's clear that they offer incredibly valuable insights for anyone who is trying to learn something new or facing unexpected setbacks in any field of knowledge. You don't have to be a teacher for this to apply.
Absolutely. So here's a final thought for you, our listener, to consider. How can you apply the idea of having a simple backup plan or reframing a failure to your own pursuit of knowledge and understanding? Think about how embracing imperfection and allowing yourself to experiment might actually accelerate your learning journey in the long run.